Joined now by former CBS Evening News anchor Dan Rather, now managing editor, anchor of Dan Rather Reports on AXS TV. Mr. Rather, you've covered more than a few conventions in your time. What do you think about, what are you thinking as we go into these conventions? There was a period, I think, in which everyone said conventions have become essentially 4-day infomercials. There's no intrigue. There's no, there's no chaos, nothing unexpected. Do you think that chain will be broken this year?
I have no idea. It is true that conventions, modern conventions, have mostly been infomercials, that the balance of power switched after 1968. Before 1968, conventions had the balance of power. After 1968, caucuses and primaries. But I do expect them to be big infomercials. But given what's preceded these conventions, I'm open-minded. Anything can happen. Expect the unexpected. I will say that with the Republican convention in Cleveland, there's more unpredictability with it because, as you pointed out, Donald Trump has the wall and the opposition to Muslim immigration as the two, I would say, main anchors of what he stands for. Beyond that, it gets very confusing. However, I think he got a break today, to tell you the truth, in the last few days, because with the Democratic platform, Hillary Clinton has at least, in the abstract, been pulled to the left. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately for her, Trump is so far to the right that this pull to the left may not affect her as it might under other circumstances. But that's something to look out for, because the perception will be is that she moves significantly to the left in order to accommodate Bernie Sanders and his followers, and that gives Trump an opening.
You say that in I think in the context of normal politics, right? I mean, what I was just saying there is you would say, okay, well, here are the items, right, that, these positions are, far to the left, right? You can imagine a Republican making that case. But have you ever covered a general election, or an election, I guess, in the case of Trump particularly, that has been so devoid of this kind of substantive rhetoric? Well,
you'd have to go back to the George Wallace campaign. People tend to forget George Wallace was at least mildly successful in 1968, less so in 72.
Won a number of states.
But that's the closest we've come to having this kind of campaign. It's been almost 50 years ago, but 1968 is the year closest to what we're experiencing here in 2016. Again, most Americans alive today were not alive in 1968, and many of those who were, I don't have memory, but the country was really felt wrecked at the time. Anti-war demonstrations, had the assassinations not only of President John Kennedy, but Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. There were race riots in the streets. So this would be the closest parallel that we have. It's not an exact parallel by any stretch of the imagination. There was no, for example, no social media in 1968, which has made a big difference here. But getting back to the platform for a moment, it occurs to me, having said that, I think the Democratic platform as it now is formed jerks Hillary Clinton somewhat to the left, but I operate under the creed of beware of pastries, easy credit, and politicians' promises, particularly in platforms.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the big question, I think, for all the Sanders supporters who worked very hard, and we'll talk a little bit about this later in the show, to make those commitments is what exactly, if that check will clear once, should she be elected?
Well, if the past is prologue,
right,
the party platforms don't amount to much. Right. They're about as useless as old nail clippings. Right. That once in office, sometimes the candidate will give a slight bout of the platform, but you and I are going to make a lot about the platforms that the Republicans and Democrats come out with. But going forward, it isn't going to amount to much in the long poll.
Yeah, we will see, unless there are people who effectively make it amount to something in terms of how they pressure. Dan Rather, pleasure. Thank you
very much, Chris. Thanks for having me.